When we normally think about international borders or, contested territories, we tend to picture things we can actually see.
Right, like a line drawn on a map.
Exactly, a concrete barrier, or maybe naval ships lined up in a vast ocean. Places where you can read the flags, measure the distance, and physically watch the cannons.
It's tangible.
Yeah, it's tangible. But what happens when the most critical battleground on Earth is completely invisible to the naked eye? I mean, a place where a silent neighbor might just be peacefully passing by, or they might be pointing a blinding, invisible flashlight directly at your navigational compass.
Well, it creates the ultimate gray zone. The lines aren't just blurred, they literally orbit the Earth at roughly 17,000 miles per hour, which makes intent incredibly difficult to decipher.
Good morning and welcome to the Deep Dive. It is July 1st, 2026. Across the nation and the globe, we are navigating a period of intense technological acceleration and a rapidly shifting geopolitical climate.
And we are here to present the facts calmly and objectively as always.
Today, our focus is squarely on the ultimate high ground, which is the space domain.
To set the table for you, today's deep dive is brought to you by ProWave AI and is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application.
The title of today's exploration is Contested Orbit: Russia, China, and the New Space Race.
And just as a brief note on our sources, Stylo News is actually the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is pretty robust, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a platform designed specifically for enterprise operations across government, military, and international business sectors. So this gives you direct access to the exact same caliber of synthesized intelligence that's designed to support global decision makers.
Over the next 15 minutes or so, our mission is straightforward. We are unpacking a pretty dense stack of intelligence estimates and media reports spanning the last 2 weeks of June 2026.
We'll be mapping out the primary patterns of events in space, identifying the key decision makers and their perspectives, and looking at how the world is responding.
And I want to emphasize, we are not here to generate fears. That's not the goal. We are here to evaluate the courses of action and really understand the mechanics of what is actually happening above our heads.
Because looking at the data objectively is critical right now.
Right. So to understand the current climate of space, we really have to start by looking at the immediate day-to-day weather, essentially, the operational disruptions happening today.
And right now, the primary tactical disruptor is Russia.
But they aren't blowing things up. I mean, the intelligence assessments from mid to late June are very consistent on this. Russia is currently the most active operational threat to Allied space systems, but they are relying heavily on electronic warfare.
Yeah, what defense analysts call reversible effects.
Let's pause there. What makes a reversible effect so dangerous?
Well, it's the ambiguity it creates. We are not seeing satellites physically destroyed by missiles.
Which would create massive, indiscriminate debris fields.
Exactly, which threatens everyone, including Russia. So instead, the reports show widespread GPS and global navigation satellite system jamming. We're seeing this particularly over Northern Europe and the Baltics.
How does that actually work mechanically for someone not familiar with electronic warfare?
Okay, so think of a GPS satellite as a highly precise clock in the sky. It's constantly whispering the time down to your phone, or say your ship's navigation system. Jamming doesn't break the satellite at all.
Right.
It basically just places a giant invisible bullhorn next to your receiver on the ground, and it screams static so loud that you just can't hear the whisper anymore.
So imagine you are trying to route an emergency supply convoy, or even just navigate a commercial airliner over the Baltics, and suddenly your screen just goes completely black.
Yeah, the hardware is perfectly fine, but the function is dead.
And we're seeing reports of a new Russian system designated Volna-Kupol Garant. And allegedly, this is designed specifically to jam the Ku-band uplinks of Starlink satellites.
That's what the unverified but highly plausible reports are suggesting.
What exactly is a Ku-band uplink and why target it?
Well, the Ku-band is essentially a specific lane on the invisible radio highway. The electromagnetic spectrum is vast, right? But Starlink uses this very specific frequency lane to send high-speed data between the satellite and the dish on your roof.
Okay, so by targeting this exact lane, the Volna-Kupol Garant system is attempting to flood that specific frequency with interference.
Exactly. If you clog the lane, the data traffic stops. It's a very targeted reversible effect.
But the interference isn't just radio waves. The briefs also highlight physical proximity operations.
Yes, there was a highly notable recent incident.
Right, involving Russian satellites maneuvering incredibly close to the Polish-Finnish ICEI X-36 satellite.
And ICY is a commercial intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platform.
Yeah, and it's heavily linked to supporting Ukraine. The intelligence indicates that Russian assets moved within just 13 kilometers of the ICY satellite.
Now 13 kilometers sounds like a safe distance on Earth.
I was going to say, 13 kilometers, what, about 8 miles? That feels like plenty of room.
Down here, sure. But in orbital mechanics, that is essentially tailgating someone on a dark highway while simultaneously jamming their GPS.
Wow.
Because the mechanics of orbit mean you are traveling at kilometers per second. At those speeds, a 13-kilometer gap can close in a fraction of a second if a thruster misfires.
So it requires constant active calculation to avoid a catastrophic collision.
Exactly.
But let me push back on how decision makers view this. I mean, if these actions are reversible,
Yeah.
if it is just jamming signals and aggressive tailgating without pulling a trigger or breaking a solar panel, do global defense leaders actually consider this an attack? Or is this just, the modern equivalent of buzzing a control tower?
Well, from the Russian perspective, employing reversible effects is a highly calculated strategic course of action. It explicitly lowers the threshold for escalation.
How so?
They can cripple allied logistics, degrade communication, and intimidate commercial operators without legally triggering a mutual defense treaty response.
Like NATO's Article 5.
Exactly. You can't trigger Article 5 over radio static. It provides plausible deniability mixed with tactical denial.
So how do allied decision makers even counter that?
The Allied course of action right now focuses on resilience over retaliation. Instead of treating jamming as a traditional act of war, the focus is on building redundant, decentralized communication networks.
So just bypassing the jammer.
Precisely. If a Russian system jams one frequency or one node, the Allied system is designed to instantly detect the blockage and route the data through a different satellite or a different radio lane entirely. It neutralizes the threat by making the jamming ineffective.
Okay, so that's the immediate weather. But while Russia is exploiting the vulnerabilities in our current networks through these tactical disruptions, the intelligence suggests China is playing a very different game.
China is the shifting climate.
Right. They aren't just trying to disrupt the network, they're trying to own the infrastructure it runs on.
The intelligence clearly outlines China as the long-term strategic pacing challenge. Their acceleration is methodical. I mean, by late June 2026, China had already achieved its 43rd orbital launch of the year.
43 launches in 6 months.
Yeah. But the focal point of the recent intelligence estimates is actually their reusable Shenlong spaceplane.
The commercial tracking firm, Leo Labs, recently observed this space plane releasing a mystery object into orbit.
And a spaceplane releasing an object is inherently ambiguous.
Right, because unlike a traditional rocket that just tracks a satellite and then burns up in the atmosphere, a spaceplane can maneuver, deploy payloads, and then return to Earth.
But this ties into a much larger ambition well beyond just Earth orbit. China's strategy extends directly to the lunar surface.
And their exploration program is heavily motivated by resource acquisition, right?
Absolutely. They are specifically targeting water ice, which can be split into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel.
And helium-3.
Yes, helium-3, which is a rare isotope that is a potential fuel for future nuclear fusion.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that for a second, because mining helium-3 on the moon sounds like science fiction. Why go all the way to the moon for it?
Well, on Earth, our magnetic field and our atmosphere act as a shield, deflecting the solar wind.
Right.
But the moon has no atmosphere and no magnetic shield. So for billions of years, it has basically acted like a giant sponge, just absorbing solar wind rich in helium-3.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, mining it could theoretically provide clean, virtually limitless energy. And to achieve this, China is employing an open international cooperation model for their lunar research stations.
They are actively attracting multinational partners to build a parallel ecosystem to the U.S.-led Artemis program.
Exactly.
But here's where the ambiguity becomes a massive hurdle. I mean, how do intelligence analysts distinguish between a peaceful civilian technology demonstration and a potential weapon?
It's very difficult.
Let's use the analogy of a Swiss Army knife. If you launch a satellite that has a robotic arm designed to gently grab and refuel a dying communications satellite, well, you have also just launched a satellite with a robotic arm that can aggressively grab and blind an enemy reconnaissance satellite.
The physical mechanics are identical.
Exactly. So how do decision makers handle that ambiguity?
That ambiguity is actually the foundational core of China's dual-use strategy. Every single piece of infrastructure has both a civilian and a military application. Decision makers view this as a pacing challenge that requires incredibly precise space situational awareness.
So we essentially need a magnifying glass to see which blade of the Swiss Army knife is currently open.
That is a perfect way to look at it. It is not enough to simply track a blip on a radar screen anymore. Analysts need multispectral optical data, thermal imaging, and advanced radar to understand the object's geometry, its maneuverability, and ultimately its intent.
And alongside this technical course of action, Allied decision makers are pushing to establish clear international norms of behavior in orbit.
Right, because if the global community agrees on what constitutes a safe distance for a refueling operation, then any sudden, unannounced deviation by a dual-use satellite can be clearly flagged as a hostile act.
Okay, so if the board is set with Russian tactical jamming on one side and Chinese strategic infrastructure building on the other, the next logical step is to look at how the United States and its allies are countering these moves.
And according to these June 2026 reports, the answer relies heavily on a massive pivot to commercial industry.
It's a huge shift. Governments are no longer building everything in-house.
No, they are buying services from private companies at an unprecedented scale. And it's fundamentally reshaping national security architecture.
I mean, the financial numbers from the past 2 weeks alone are staggering. We just witnessed the historic SpaceX IPO.
Which was massive.
Yeah, they raised $75 billion, bringing the company's valuation to a staggering $2.1 trillion.
Officially surpassing Amazon.
Which is wild to think about. And to put the global scale of this in perspective, Australian billionaire Gina Rinehart made a $1 billion individual investment during this IPO.
Which signals a major institutional shift toward the space economy, space mining, and long-term lunar infrastructure.
And that commercial financial power translates directly into military agility.
It does. A prime example from the intelligence reports is Rocket Lab. They just achieved their 10th consecutive successful launch of their Electron rocket.
But the critical event here is their recent Victus Haze mission for the U.S. Space Force.
Yes. Rocket Lab executed this launch with less than 17 hours notice.
17 hours. Let's break down the physical mechanics of what that actually means. Because historically, launching a satellite takes months, if not years, of preparation.
You have to custom build the payload, integrate it onto the rocket, roll it out, fuel it, wait for a perfect weather window.
Right. Doing all of that in 17 hours essentially treats a rocket launch like dispatching an ambulance.
And that is the exact capability the Space Force is testing. The course of action is known as responsive space.
So mechanically, it means having a standardized rocket sitting fueled and ready.
With a payload that can plug and play instantly, and trajectory software that calculates orbital mechanics on the fly.
And this acts as a powerful deterrent.
Absolutely. If an adversary knows that the U.S. can replace a jammed or blinded satellite overnight using a commercial provider, the tactical value of attacking that satellite in the first place plummets.
You deter the attack by proving you can instantly recover from it.
Precisely.
I understand the theory of responsive space, but I want to heavily push back on this somewhat optimistic narrative of a commercial space utopia.
Fair enough.
Because when you read through the full stack of intelligence and infrastructure reports, there are stark realities on the ground. We have these $2 trillion commercial rocket companies, but the actual physical pipes and power grids at our national spaceports are rusting and bursting.
You are highlighting the terrestrial bottleneck. The commercial agility in orbit is sound, but the vehicles are 21st century, and they are launching from mid-20th century foundations.
Exactly. I mean, the NASA Inspector General just released a severe audit warning. The Kennedy Space Center urgently needs $1 billion just to repair legacy electrical grids and wastewater systems.
They are buckling under the high launch cadence of these commercial providers.
Furthermore, we saw the recent explosion of Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket engine during a test at Cape Canaveral. And NASA's Artemis 3 mission is actively shifting its profile from a crude lunar landing to just an orbital demonstration due to technical delays with the landers and spacesuits.
That's a lot of friction all at once.
It is. So if the bridge to the launch pad is literally crumbling, the agility in orbit doesn't really matter. I mean, you can't outsource national security if your government spaceport has a water main break.
Well, I would argue that the commercial sector anticipates this exact bottleneck and is already moving to bypass it entirely.
How so?
While the legacy infrastructure at Cape Canaveral is straining, Companies like SpaceX have built entirely independent launch facilities, like Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas, and they are developing offshore ocean launch platforms.
Okay, true.
The commercial argument is that if government infrastructure fails, private capital will simply build its own private spaceports to maintain the launch cadence.
But from a national security perspective, relying entirely on private ports creates a massive single point of failure that is outside of direct government control. I mean, a billionaire's private launch pad isn't a federal asset.
And that is the exact friction point global decision makers are facing right now. The proposed course of action requires urgent government funding to modernize the physical national spaceports.
Ensuring that the military retains guaranteed sovereign access to space.
Right, access that isn't entirely dependent on the goodwill of a corporate board.
So with trillions of dollars, crumbling infrastructure, and global security resting on these invisible systems, you might expect the public to be pretty on edge. But when we look at how everyday people are reacting, what does the data actually tell us?
Interestingly, the sentiment analysis tells a story of profound optimism.
Really?
Yeah. When we look at social media data, particularly from X over the last 2 weeks, public sentiment is overwhelmingly positive. It's actually exceeding 80% in favor of commercial space expansion.
Why is the public so calm when the intelligence reports we just discussed are highlighting space planes and electronic warfare?
It mostly comes down to human psychology and the power of seeing science fiction become reality. While defense analysts are worrying about Russian jamming, the public is captivated by the consumer technology.
Like what, specifically?
While users are highly enthusiastic about SpaceX's reusability records and the visual animations of the Artemis II lunar flyby trajectory, those have generated massive engagement. It taps into a deep sense of national pride and exploration.
And what about the consumer tech side? Are people connecting this to their daily lives?
Absolutely. There is massive excitement around the announcement of Starlink's direct-to-cell mobile service,
The idea that your standard cell phone will soon connect directly to a satellite.
eliminating dead zones permanently. It is incredibly appealing to the public. Users are excitedly referring to future off-world connectivity as Marslink. They are focused on the economic and exploratory potential, not the military threats.
What about the setbacks, though? When the Blue Origin engine exploded during testing, or when the Artemis delays were announced, did that cause a panic online?
Not really. The reaction was largely pragmatic. The public seems to understand that testing involves failure. They view an engine exploding on a test stand as a necessary step toward reliability, not some massive catastrophe.
That's surprisingly level-headed.
It is. Now, there remains a small minority of users sharing historical moon landing conspiracies, which reliably flare up during any major lunar announcements. But the overarching data shows a public that is forward-looking and deeply optimistic.
So based on these intelligence proofs, what are the specific upcoming events you would advise listeners to watch for in the coming days and weeks?
There are 3 key events on the near-term horizon to keep an eye on. First, monitor SpaceX's launch of their first Starfall re-entry capsule.
Right, because we have mastered getting cargo to orbit, but bringing large amounts of manufactured goods back down safely is the next major economic hurdle.
Exactly. Second, watch for the preparations surrounding the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which is launching aboard a Falcon Heavy. And finally, keep an eye on the continued testing of Starlink's direct-to-cell mobile network capabilities.
Because as we discussed earlier, that has massive implications for both consumer communication and creating those redundant military networks.
It covers both bases perfectly.
It really is a phenomenal amount of activity, and it's fundamentally altering how we interact with the domain above us. Out in the ocean, you can see the ships, you know the flags, and you can measure the distance. But in orbit, the lines are invisible. The weapons are silent radio waves, and the ships are dual-use tools that can build a lunar base or blind an adversary.
It requires a completely new way of seeing the world.
And we want to help you see it clearly. As we conclude today's brief, a reminder that the insights and synthesis you heard today were brought to you by Stylo News. Stylo News is a mobile and computer application that you can download and completely customize.
It allows you to generate personal, intelligence-style briefs, just like this deep dive, pulled from hundreds of traditional news sources and social platforms like X.
It is specifically designed to cut through the noise, bypass the sensationalism, and give you the objective facts you need to understand complex geopolitical situations.
It's an incredible tool.
Take control of your information feed. Subscribe to Stylo News today to get AI-powered news on demand by visiting www.stylonews.com. We want to sincerely thank you for joining us and listening to today's deep dive. We love tackling the subjects that matter most to you, so please request topics for future deep dives and be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.
And as we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've discussed today regarding the privatization of space. If commercial companies are now the primary entities building the infrastructure, laying the communication lines, and developing the transportation to the moon and beyond, who writes the laws on Mars?
That's a great question.
Right. If a private corporation reaches a valuable lunar crater first, does corporate policy supersede international treaty? It is a question the world will have to answer very soon.
Something to think about. Stay curious, stay informed, and we will see you next time.